So welcome everyone to our I-CBT Friday discussion group. We are a group of clinicians in different stages of learning I-CBT, and this has been a really wonderful space for us to practice skills, advance our knowledge, and support each other in the learning process for using I-CBT for the treatment of OCD. Thank you all for being here. My name is Sylvia Levine. I have a private practice in New Jersey, and I co-lead these groups with Margaret McVale and Mary Hashborough. And today is a very special day. We have two incredible guests. Margaret McVale and Lori Aitkin have gracefully brought us two clients that have gone through the treatment modules of I-CBT in treating their OCD, and they were very gracefully accepted the invitation to share their experience with us. Before we start, I would like to mention that all attendees will have an opportunity to ask questions to the presenters. You can either post it on the chat or ask the question directly. The recording today will be, the meeting today will be recorded, but we will be posting it in a month in case there is some, hesitations about not having it posted or not. We want to give extra time to our presenters to kind of sit on it and think if they still feel comfortable with that. With that being said, maybe we can ask Margaret and Lori to introduce themselves and introduce their clients. Maybe Margaret, we can start with you.
Actually, Sylvia, I think Christy is going to go first, if that's okay.
Oh, sure.
Got
it wrong.
Switch the order.
Sure.
So I'm Lori Aitkin. I own Anxiety Center of Tampa, specializing in anxiety, OCD, and related disorders. And I'm just thrilled to introduce my client, Christy. She's been just such a joy to work with. Christy called me in September of last year, 2022, just broke my heart because she had been to several ERP therapists. She had spent 6 weeks working her tail off in a PHP, and through all of that, she had gotten worse and was just hopeless. So, she reached out to Kim Vincente, who owns the nonprofit Jack MHA, and Jack their mission is to help educate and support education for clinicians and clients who have OCD. So, Kim referred her to me, said, well, maybe Lori can help. Coincidentally, she had been reading about I-CBT. So I said, well, we have this new approach, let's try it. So she was all in and we worked. She was amazing through December. By December, she had gone into remission. And then she was hit, with some real severe life stressors. And so she regressed a bit, but she didn't give up. And this allowed us to go back and, kind of say, well, what's not working? So we reviewed the I-CBT basics, and we also went much more deeply into her vulnerable self theme, which was so helpful. We uncovered a lot. And so, she continues to struggle at times, but she is brave enough to share her ups and downs of her journey with others. She's passionate about spreading the word about I-CBT and letting people know that ERP is not the only option. She's the newest member of OCD Jacksonville and is also an IOCDF advocate. And so I'm just so happy for her and just excited for the difference she's making in people's lives.
Thank you so much, Lori, for that introduction. I am so honored to be here. And can everybody hear me and see me okay? I really wish I had a she shed because I would be out there right now. Unfortunately, our house is kind of small, so I don't have the best setup. So as long as y'all can see me and hear me, I will get started. So I just want to tell y'all a little bit of my background. I grew up in a loving Christian home, but my mom suffered from severe depression. And at the time also had OCD, but little was known about OCD. So she didn't realize that that was something she was struggling from as well. And so as a child, I lacked a real sense of security and suffered with anxiety to varying degrees, really since early childhood. And finally, when I was a teenager, probably about 13, I was in counseling and I had some psychological testing done. And the testing did show that I had some emotional abandonment issues from my mom. Of course, she was heartbroken about that, but it was really out of her control given all the things she was dealing with. So another factor of my childhood was that I felt a lot of rejection and felt excluded from the neighborhood kids. And that was a very painful, another kind of abandonment issue for me. So I did see a psychiatrist when I was 13 and unfortunately was misdiagnosed. This was in the mid to late 80s where little was known about OCD. I was diagnosed with bipolar type 2, which anybody who knows me would know that is totally not me. I've never been manic. I've never been depressed, won the Sunshine Award. It's not me. But nobody really knew what OCD was. So I was put on lithium all through high school and managed okay until my parents divorced when I was 16. So that was another really rocky time for me. Thankfully, I was able to get away from the dysfunction in college, and college was beautiful. I was really living into my I-CBT real self and actually became president of my class my senior year and spoke at my graduation and decided, okay, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to chase my dreams. I moved to DC for grad school. And that is when my OCD reared its ugly head big time. I find it interesting how OCD attacks your identity in times of transition, like my teenage years, doing something new for the first time, leaving home to a very unfamiliar environment, like DC for grad school. And I ended up flying home for my spring break, seeing my psychiatrist, and going on a really heavy medication because, again, we didn't know it was OCD, and my thoughts had a psychotic flavor. So that's another narrative that was fed to me. So I, with the help of those new meds, I graduated from grad school and was in a better place and met my sweet husband, got married in 2001 and was put on Prozac because I wanted desperately to have children. And thankfully that worked for us and worked for me. I have two beautiful daughters, a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old. The Prozac worked beautifully for about 15 years. And really the OCD symptoms and the anxiety were very well managed for the most part. Until another big life shift, 2019, my menopause started. And I know for my mom, that was a really rocky time in her life too. She said her anxiety was probably the worst during that time period. I really feel like, we talk a lot about postpartum depression, we talk about postpartum OCD, but we don't talk about menopause and OCD. So I definitely think the menopause was a huge factor in the spike in my OCD and my anxiety. So at that time, I had been just doing CBT. And my therapist was like, you need an OCD specialist. You definitely need an OCD specialist. So I was sent to an ERP therapist, very well known here in the Jacksonville area. And he worked with me for a year. And I was all in I was a pro at writing worst case scenario scripts. I would, do my 45 minutes. I was all in. And anybody who knows me knows I'm a pretty determined, feisty person, and I've got a goal. I'm gonna work hard at it. So I was all in, and finally he was just like, I felt like he was very frustrated with me because I wasn't making the progress that he wanted. And he was like, okay, you need to go to an intensive treatment. And at the time I was working with a psychiatrist, and I went through a dead end path of trying medication after medication after medication. So all of that to be said, that's enough of the bad stuff. The the ERP journey just didn't work for me. Last summer, I just hit rock bottom and could barely leave my house. And for anybody who knows me, I'm highly extroverted, have traveled the world, and that just really wasn't like me at all. And so it was like, I have to do something. I'm going to do this PHP. Signed myself up, did the PHP, and just got sicker and sicker and sicker. And so much so that I had burning in my arms and my hands and my chest all the time, erratic sleep. I lost so much weight. I was like a size 0. I mean, I've always wanted to be skinny, but it was like sickly. And every time I tried to bring up to my therapist with the PHP program, it was like, you're not getting this, you're not doing this right. And they would even coach my husband. And I mean, it was pure hell, I don't need to go to hell. I have lived hell doing what I did. So literally I was willing to do the titration down to the 3 hours a day. And they were like, no, we're done with you. You're failure at this, basically. And I mean, I had no idea what I was going to do. I was desperate. And thankfully, just like Lori said, Kim Vincini happened to have Lori's contact info. And like Lori said, I had researched I-CBT because I was like, there's got to be hope. So I started working with Lori. And I mean, for the first time in over a year, Lori was somebody who finally validated that, no, you didn't fail the treatment failed you. And for the first time, I could cling to Lori's hope, because I didn't have any, but I could cling to Lori's hope that there were other treatment options available. And ERP was not the end all be all. I was not the first person to not be successful in this treatment, and in fact get worse. And I know Lori has seen many others just like me. I even chipped a tooth doing exposures, ended up with a bite guard doing my exposures, and was not sleeping. I could go on and on about the physical symptoms that the ERP caused me. And I still have some of the mind-body symptoms to this day that Lori and I are working on, because I have health anxiety. So all it did was exacerbate that. So we are totally trying to undo all the damage still. Thankfully, like Lori said, I've made huge headway under her therapy and this framework. So PHP basically taught me to completely distrust myself, which is the exact opposite of I-CBT. And to just live in the bubble 24/7 and not live in the real Christy. So it made me convinced that I was psychotic. It made me convinced that all these health issues were going to become a reality. And my worst fear would come true, leading me to believe that I would abandon my family the way my mom emotionally abandoned me. Which we now know is the vulnerable self-fear that I-CBT has taught me. So anyway, when I started working with Lori, the modules were so helpful to me. There was finally, I love my book. It's very well highlighted, underlined. I want to thank Dr. Artema and Dr. O'Connor and Brittany Goff. I think I saw your name on the call. You're one of my heroes too, because you have created the workbook, which is a wonderful tool also for I-CBT. I can't wait for more and more tools to become available. And also the videos on I-CBT online. I feel like I've heard Lucy, I've heard, so many of you with lived experience too, which is so hopeful for me. I really feel like there's so much power in sharing our stories of recovery with each other, that just more and more of that needs to happen, especially in regards to I-CBT. So thank you for this platform. You're doing phenomenal work, and I can't wait to help spread the word. One of the biggest aha moments was that OCD is 100% imagination. I'm like, oh my gosh, no one told me this. No one told me in ERP. It was just like, well, let's take whatever your thought is and, exacerbate that, rather than no, this thought is actually coming from somewhere, and it's your imagination, and that it's 100% imagination, and it's based on this doubt that you have. And let's look at the doubt, and let's look at the sequence and see what your compulsions are, and see how we can help kind of take a step back before you cross that bridge. And half the time I'm halfway on the bridge, and I can, you know, that's one of the big things Lori and I have been working on, because for me, rumination has been a huge problem. And so learning when I am ruminating to try to step out of the bubble, to try to ground myself in the here and now, and try to use common sense. And that's what my husband is. I don't know if any of y'all know the Enneagram. He's a 5 on the Enneagram. He's a computer software developer, was a Navy pilot before that. So he's all about common sense and all about the truth. So he's like, thank you, I-CBT, for finally just being a rational, logical approach to OCD. I mean, it really makes sense. So, you know, I finally realized it's all about the stories that we tell ourselves, and trusting and believing the story that more aligns with me and my real self. I've already talked to you a lot about the physical sensations that I've experienced. And what I realize now through I-CBT is that I take a lot of those physical sensations and I spin them into an OCD story. And I didn't realize I was doing that. You know, I was just like running from doctor to doctor because the symptoms felt real, and got really discounted, and really, I mean, racking up the medical bills, you know, checking everything out. And, you know, as Lori has taught me, you know, every symptom I've worried about has either gone away or I've learned to deal with it. So that has been very beneficial to me, that even though the pain might be real, the story I'm telling myself might be actually exacerbating those symptoms. And if I can calm down that story, I can calm down a lot of my symptoms. And she's taught me the difference between a reasonable doubt, like the time I did have to go to the dermatologist for a spot and have it checked, versus obsessional doubt, things that really were more far-fetched and weren't really based in reality, and just in my imagination and my fears. The tricks and cheats of OCD is another, that was a great module for me as well. Just realizing that basically OCD is all BS, and waving that BS flag. And I don't think I've ever cussed so much in my life, but they're very therapeutic. I highly recommend it. Just working through all this BS, you know, and just no longer letting it hide the real me. And I think the biggest thing is a lot of my friends now feel like they have Christy back. My husband feels like he has Christy back. And I am slowly learning, like, I can trust myself again, because I'm a very joyful, passionate, energetic person. And I think for the longest time, I just was running from my anxiety and over busying myself. And then when this happened, I so shut down that now I've talked to Lori about filling up the void, because the void is real with OCD. So now it's like picking and choosing the activities in my life that really give me joy and purpose and meaning, and what that looks like now on the other side, coming out on the other side. So learning to trust myself, knowing that I'm a fighter, I'm brave, that I am committed to my healing, I'm committed to my recovery. My values and my faith are extremely important to me. And that if I actually were living into that feared self, I wouldn't care about my healing and recovery, and I would be giving up on myself. And I've never wanted to harm or kill myself. That just turned into another OCD theme after I got out of PHP, waking up every morning to those thoughts. And Lori helped me navigate that, navigate the OCD psychosis, navigate the health anxiety. So, you know, it's been fun times, but but we're getting there. And through I-CBT, I'm learning that I get a lot of crazy thoughts. I get a lot of weird thoughts, but I'm just a really creative, imaginative person. I don't have to be afraid of those thoughts. You know, this morning I was in the kitchen making my daughter a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and I got a thought, oh, what if I'm in the peanut butter jar? Well, there's a movie on that. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. You know, like, I can just have some humor with this. It doesn't have to be freak me out every time I get this thought and think I'm crazy, you know? I asked my husband the other day, what are you thinking about? And he said, nothing. And I thought, oh, that sounds heavenly, because my mind's definitely not thinking about nothing. But I am learning to think about things that are really more the real Christy. And that's what's been so beneficial. I'm also, the hugest aha moment for me with I-CBT, again, as Lori mentioned, is the vulnerable self. And, you know, the whole time I was in PHP, I would say, but why, like, why these themes? Where are these thoughts coming from? Like, and they'd be like, oh, no, we don't talk about that. Like, you don't need to go there. And yes, I do. Like, that is very much, you know, my childhood and what my mom suffered through. And, you know, my mom's now an LCSW and she's doing amazing. And she said all along, you know, you need to deal with these things. And, you know, I just was always shut down whenever I mentioned any of them. And with Lori, finally, we're working, like she said, it's layers of an onion, but we're working through some of those vulnerable self themes and learning that I'm the exact opposite of that. My younger daughter last night did not make the dance team, and that's one of her first failures that she's ever had. She's my easy child. My harder child has got some bigger issues to deal with, but my easier child was feeling like this was the first time she felt anything, and she was sobbing her eyes out. And I was laying in the bed with her and just holding her and telling her, it's okay, like, you're going to be okay. And I know it really hurts. And I thought, am I living my feared self or am I living my real self? I think I'm living my real self right about now, loving my daughter because that's my values. That's who the real Christy is, a mom who's devoted to my children and being there for them. Even though I might fear that I could be like my mom when I was growing up, who was not able to be there for me. The inferential confusion piece was huge for me. So anyway, to kind of summarize, the past few years has basically just been the perfect storm for me. Like I said, for 15 years, I had pretty smooth sailing with the Prozac for my OCD, and then the menopause, the Prozac poop out, failing ERP with several therapists, doing a PHP, raising a difficult teen. All of these factors just kind of played in to this intense battle that I ended up in. But I'm starting to see the victories, and I'm just trying to really have patience as I retrain my brain. I mean, just the other night, my husband was, you know, I was looking to the quick fix, the magic bullet, which we all OCD sufferers do. How long, when is this going to end? And, you know, mine's never going to get better. I'm sure you guys have all heard this a zillion times from your clients. I'm sure it's nothing new that you haven't heard, but my husband was like, no, you finally have the right therapist, the right treatment. And this is going to take some time because you've been dealing with this for a long time. It's not going to go away overnight. Thank God for my husband too. Very blessed there. But finally, I want to say the advocacy work piece, turning my pain into purpose has been huge. And Jack MHA, I did a blog on their website through Lori's suggestion, and it was very healing for me to do that. And I'm finding the more I step out in faith, my fear shrinks. So even though I was scared to do this today, I feel like this is one step in my healing, by sharing my story and not living in shame and not living in silence, but sharing my story and sharing the wonderful work of I-CBT. As Lori said, I'm now a member of the JAX OCD board, and I'm going to be doing my first IOCDF live stream panel on May the 9th. And so I'm really just praying and hoping that I can win some people over to listen to I-CBT and check it out, because it's amazing. And I want to thank each and every one of you for your dedication to OCD treatment and to your clients. And Lori, I mean, I'm going to totally bawl if I even say anything, but Lori is one of my heroes. So thank you.
Sorry, I just want to say, Christy, you're one of my heroes. You have worked so hard and you have just never given up. And I have so much admiration and respect for you and everything you've done and everything you're going to do. I think you're going to be a wonderful advocate and help change many lives with this. Thank you for sharing today.
Thank you.
Yeah, Christy, I think that all of us are really touched by your story and your courage and vulnerability here with us. so painful to hear how much struggle you had and how ERP failed you when you actually felt that it was you, but it really was a treatment that was not appropriate for your presentation. I think I speak for everyone here that we so admire you and really appreciate you sharing your story with us. And to have other OCD sufferers view this, hopefully in the future, will be so eye-opening for many of them and give so much hope. So we want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
And Christy, if you get a chance to look in the chat, you'll also see a lot of comments directed to you and thanking you for sharing your story, and that a lot of us are crying too. So
thank you so much.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you for
there's another hero right there.
And I think you're very brave for telling your story, you know, and very happy for you and thankful to Lori as well that you found something that works, and that's the point, right? And to have options, and if something doesn't work, it makes no sense to repeat the same thing over and over. You have to do something else, right? And if there are other evidence-based approaches there, then it makes sense and it worked for you. So that's great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again. And I'm thinking perhaps, Margaret, would you think this would be all right for us to transition to your presentation as well for your client?
Yes, yeah. I'll go ahead and introduce her and say, we're going to have a balance. Christy, thank you so much for sharing your story. That was beautiful. And I'm so happy that you found Lori and you're getting some healing. The balance today is going to be with Stephanie, because Stephanie actually had ERP and was doing great. And like many of the therapists here with lived experience, we were about wrapping up when I learned about I-CBT and said, hey, maybe this could be like a relapse prevention kind of thing. We could just strengthen it. And she was very brave to let me learn on her and experiment on her. So we kept going with I-CBT, and it was a pretty cool experience. But Stephanie is an amazing person. I've gotten very close with her over the time we've been working together, and her strength and her courage and her willingness to face her fears through ERP, and then embrace a new approach that took her to a different level. So my name's Margaret McCall. I didn't introduce myself. You all probably know me by now, but I'm happy to introduce Stephanie. So I'll give it to you, Stephanie.
Thank you. I am Stephanie Ayers, and I was the one that made everyone irritated at the dinner table sitting in a restaurant, because I would have to organize the sweet and low and equals and turn on the same direction, and everything had to be perfect sitting there. And I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was strange that no one else cared. The problem was that it just didn't rest in having things in order. It expanded to every part of my life, into my relationships and other things. And no one had any idea. On the outside, I just seemed like a shy, emotional, indecisive person. I was a really good student. I was a really good worker. I was the one who liked calculus class, but hated lunch because you had to interact with other people. I was so concerned about what other people thought of me. On the inside, they just didn't see that struggle that I faced every day. Every little thing in life that should not be a thing was a thing to me. I magnified everything, from asking friends if they want to go see a movie. Everything was a big ordeal because I was so worried that I wasn't good enough, that they would judge me, that they would turn their back on me, that they would leave me. I was constantly seeking reassurance that they cared for me, that they wanted to be with me, that they did like me, that they wouldn't leave me. And I didn't, if someone said, do you want to go see a movie? I wouldn't say which one I wanted. Everything was, I don't know, or it doesn't matter. When I knew a lot of things matter, but I didn't care. I was willing to do what they wanted to do because I didn't want to be judged. Because in my head, it wasn't just a matter of, oh, I don't want to see that one. Well, that's fine. Let's work it out. Let's compromise. Let's see something we do want to see. In my head, it's, well, she's stupid. She's not, if she wants to see that, then I'm not going with her. I don't want to have anything to do with someone like that. Every decision I made, I felt like was being judged. If someone was sharing recipes, they would say, how do you make yours? Well, I don't no. Well, yeah, I do. I make it. I know what I do. I just don't want to share, because what if they think it's stupid and they turn their back on me? So I was just constantly seeking reassurance, and everything became about me. If I was going off with friends and they invited someone else, everyone else would be like, well, the more the merrier. Well, in my mind, what, you don't like me that much that you have to dilute my presence with other people, and you don't want to talk to me, so you got to bring other people to talk to. Everything was about me and seeking reassurance that I was okay and that I was good enough. And that's actually what landed me in Margaret's office. I had a friend who came to me and she said she was moving back to where she came from, to be with her family, to be with her church that she had always felt was home. Everything was perfect for her, but I didn't hear any of that. All I heard was, you weren't enough to keep me here, and our friendship meant nothing, so I'm leaving. So my last little bit of time with her was nothing more than me crying and making it about me and not about her. And hindsight, it took a lot of courage and love and compassion on her part to come to me and say, look, girl, you got a problem and you need help. So that's how I ended up in Margaret's office. And we started working on things like social anxiety and different things like that. And it was a little bit into treatment that she finally said that she thought the issue was OCD. And I was offended. I mean, I was like, are you not hearing what I'm telling you? You know, this thing is not, you know, I understand that some people have gone through abuse and major things in their life. I haven't gone through that, but this thing is still debilitating on the inside. I'm very high functioning on the outside, but on the inside, I'm paralyzed when I'm around people. And you're not hearing what I'm saying because you're calling it OCD. I mean, everybody has OCD. People throw the word around like it means, you know, it means nothing. And so I felt like she was kind of not hearing what I was saying, but because I was worried about her judging me if I had an opposing opinion, I went along with the treatment and didn't say anything, and I'm glad I did. At one point, she said, how would you feel if you moved an item on your desk? I was like, I'd be fine with it. I mean, it's where it's at because it has the best functionality there. It makes the most sense there. I have a reason for things being the way they were, but no, it wouldn't bother me if I moved it. She said, okay, so tomorrow move something from one side of your desk to the other. And I got to work and I put my hand over my stapler and I couldn't touch it. I started crying and I started shaking and I got sick to my stomach. And I was like, what's wrong with me? This is not a big deal. Why can't I move it from this side over to the other side? And I had to go back to her and tell her I failed. And I felt crushed. I was like, well, maybe there's something to this. So she said, let's take smaller steps. Draw a picture of your desk with your stapler out of place. The only thing that was scarier than moving my stapler was the thought of her judging my drawing. So I, after a few days, I worked up the courage to actually move the stapler. And that was one of the biggest turning points in my therapy, because after the stapler was moved, I was okay. It was the anticipation of moving something that was stressful to me. Once it got moved, I was perfectly fine with it being there. And the thing that I noticed was that I quit worrying about everything else being straight and in order, because it's almost like I had something to focus on. You know, if this is out of place, there's no need to move on to anything else. And this wasn't as painful as what I thought it would be. So I just endured it. People at work who know me and know the way I keep things, so I was crazy to have a stapler randomly placed in the middle of my desk, but it was almost liberating to do that. Since my grandmother died, the family comes over to my mom's side of the family comes over to my house for holidays, and it is the most stressful thing in the world. I've got the dish soap on the wrong side of the sink. I've got coats and purses everywhere. I've got cups, and I could not enjoy holidays with my family because I was so worried about all the things that were not where they should be, and what were they thinking about my house and how I do things. And so we started working on that so that I would be prepared for the next holiday. I was moving things around the house, putting the dish soap on the wrong side. And she told me to make a junk drawer. And at the time I was like, I don't have a junk drawer. I don't need a junk drawer, but I told her the other day, this whole room that I'm in right now is basically a junk room, thanks to her, because I redid some of my house and this has just become a catch-all. So what she did was definitely working with me, and I would not invite friends to do anything. I was afraid they'd say no. But we were accomplishing things. I would start inviting people out eventually, and one of the assignments was to ask a friend to a movie, and I called, and I knew she would say yes. I mean, there was no doubt in my head. But when I called her, she was too busy to go with me, and she had some things going on. And I was like, I hung up the phone. I was like, or text, and I was like, this isn't the way that was supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to say no. But I wasn't devastated by it. I almost found it humorous. I was like, yeah, this is what I was worried about. So I'm taking steps to not worry about it. And then it happened, but it's okay. There was no reason to worry about it. So that was something slower happening with me, slower overcoming is asking people things and interacting with other people. The moving things around and having things in order, that came a little easier. And at one point I told Margaret, you're going to have trouble getting any further past this. But she has, and we've improved. It was just a lot of work. And that was one of the things that I was worried about, is that all of the homework that we were doing, all of the daily mood logs, and just, I mean, it was to the point where I was carrying a bag around with me with all of my forms, having to go to Starbucks and just so I would be in the middle of a bunch of people reading a book and trying to get used to making eye contact with people. But here I am filling out all these forms in the process. And I was worried that that was going to be a lifelong thing and that I would eventually get tired of. So I would just drop it and then revert back to my old self. So that was my one drawback with that. But I don't regret ERP because it helped me understand how OCD works, like the mechanics of it and why I'm responding the way that I am. So we made good progress, and I don't regret it. But like she said, we were near the end, and when she approached me about a new therapy, and the thing that I noticed right off is how compassionate it is. Before it was almost like, yeah, you're screwed up, and the way we're going to fix you is you're just going to sit in your discomfort and deal with it until you're no longer discomforted, is the way it felt. And this new approach was like, you know what? These thoughts are actually trying to help you. They're trying to protect you. And it's, if you work together with it rather than against it, you can learn what is reality when you should try to handle something and what is imaginary, and you just need to let it go. So it's very compassionate. And we started relating it again to every part of my life. There was another turning point where I let my dogs out in the morning before I get ready for work, and I have to leave the door open because I've got one that'll just turn around and stand at the door and whine if I don't wait on her. So, but I came back in and they were outside and they were barking, and I ignored it. Finally, I went out to see what they were barking at, and there was a bat on the ground that they were barking at. And immediately I panicked because here bats have rabies. Now my dogs are dead. I'm calling the vet, and they're like, you need to bring the bat in and your dogs. So they had to take the bat off to be analyzed, and my dogs had to be quarantined. And they had mentioned the fact that if the bat came back positive, there's a small chance they'd end up having to euthanize my dog. And that's all I heard. I mean, I was panicking. And when I came back to Margaret and was talking to her, she was explaining how what I was going through were OCD thoughts. And she started giving examples of other things that we had talked about through our time together, and relating that, how OCD played a factor in that. And something clicked in my head that's what I do when I'm going through something. I immediately, in a few seconds, scan every possibility of an outcome, and I pick the absolute worst one, and then I mentally and physically react as though it's reality. And the whole purpose is to protect me, but it's sort of like killing a roach with a flame torch. You're getting the job done, the roach is dead, but look at all the other damage that you've done. And so the key was identifying when I'm crossing the line, when I'm getting on that bridge. I have a choice. Am I going to step into the bubble, or am I going to step back into reality? I had had the same job for 21 years, and I had been unhappy for a great portion of that time, but I felt stuck and I was scared to move forward. Since our therapy, I have actually applied for a new job and I got it, and I've changed after 21 years, and change is not something that I do well with, but I have gotten a new job, and I grew so much from that. I said, well, I won't feel stuck anymore, because now I'll feel like if I have to do it again, I know what it's like. It's okay if they tell me no. And I just grew from that. Well, a position came open that would be a step up from where I was. Now, I had not been there a year, so I didn't think I had any opportunity. And those thoughts came back again that I'm not worthy, so why would I even try? But then there was a struggle, because I said, well, you just told yourself that you would be able to face this if it happened again. So why are you doubting? And I was like, yeah, but that's if I'm going somewhere else where they tell me no and I don't have to face them again. This, if they tell me no, I'm in the same job, I'll have to see the same people and they'll know I'm a failure. They'll know that I was told no, so I don't want to go ahead. I fought those thoughts and I applied and I got that other job. So I got the promotion. I have been overcoming doubts that I'm not good enough during the learning curve of my job. You know, it's just an ongoing process. But I have done so much now that I never thought I would have. I went to a United Way meeting the other day, and someone from my old job saw me and she said, what are you doing here? This isn't your scene. And yeah, it's not my, it wasn't my scene, but I said, I actually volunteered to come. You know, I used to go if I was made, but I volunteered to come, and I didn't sit there frozen inside. It was like, yeah, I'm here just like anybody else, and I'm worthy to be here just like anybody else. What are we going to do? How are y'all going to entertain me? What are we going to talk about? You know, I was a part of it. It wasn't like I was living in the bubble just watching other people live. And I don't know if Margaret remembers, but when I first started seeing her, I shared a poem that I wrote in 2004. And the very first line of the poem was, alone in the destructive solitude of my thoughts. And there's another part in it that talks about feeling like you're trapped in a room, looking, and there's no door that you can ever get out, only a window so you can look out and see other people living a real life. In hindsight, when we got to this part about the bubble and OCD, it was perfectly, what I was explaining perfectly was OCD in my poem. And I had no clue that this is what it was. And I certainly had no hope that I could change, but all of that is out the window now. And I feel like if I can overcome some of the things that I have, then there's hope for anybody, because I felt so trapped. I felt like I was never part of anything. I wasn't ever going to be good enough. I felt like I worked 10 times harder than other people, but I was not even half as good as what they were. Wasn't half as worthy as what they were to enjoy a good life. And what's come after that has just been peace and courage to do new things. It's just a complete difference in my life. I mean, the compassion of knowing, yeah, there's reasons why you think what you think. Now let's look at them and see how we can adjust those. Let's get the right defense for you and not just the absolute worst case scenario type of defense. And I'm really thankful that Margaret decided to try it rather than just go ahead and stop, since we were near the end.
I never tire of hearing your story, Stephanie. That was beautiful. Stephanie shared her story in our support group sometimes, and you just done such amazing work, and I'm so happy for you. And I want to tell people that literally this was at the time when I started working with I-CBT with Stephanie. I was learning it. I hadn't finished the book. I said, let's try it. She was willing to let me practice and experiment. Done a great job.
One of the things that Margaret was saying too while we were going through it, she's like, I told you that I'm just now learning this. And so we're kind of stumbling through it. She said, do you think any less of me because of it? I was like, absolutely not. I haven't thought anything of it. I think it has been very courageous. And so she was like, well, why do you feel like everyone's judging you for trying things, for, you know, judging every stumble that you make. I wasn't judging myself with the same measuring tool that I was everyone else.
Thank you, Stephanie, for your story, and also for your bravery in telling your story here. Strikes me about your story, and can correct me if I'm wrong, or how you experienced it, that it gave you more insight into your into your OCD.
Yes, sir.
You understood it better, and that helped you a lot in getting beyond it.
It made it more welcoming to want to look for a resolution when I felt like it had open arms, like, oh, I hear you. Let's figure it out. There's a reason why you're feeling this. Now let's work through it. Whereas before it was like, oh yeah, I hear you. You're messed up. You need to go sit and be messed up for a little while until you're not messed up anymore. It's just like, yeah, the fire burns that you're touching. So touch it so long that it doesn't burn anymore. Well, that's not necessarily a good thing.
Right.
I mean, you're causing nerve damage at that point. So it's like, no, let's compassionately look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not, I mean, it did help. The ERP did help. It was just such a different approach that is so much more welcoming.
Right. It helped you, but from what I understand, it gave you an extra step, right? To go beyond what you learned with ERP before.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you very much for talking here and telling your story.
Thank you.
And in case anybody thinks I actually said those words to her during ERP, I did not. That's how it felt, right, Stephanie?
No, I meant the approach, not you. That's the way the approach felt was, so this is discomforting. You need to sit with your discomfort until you get used to it, is the way it felt.
That's right. We had a lot of fun doing ERP too, but it was different. It was very different. Thank you, Stephanie. I'm sure Sylvie's going to probably take over and open for any questions that people have.
I just want to, oh, I'm sorry, Sylvie. Look, I just want to say, Fred, thank you. Mike, Carl, Teresa, I mean, everybody here has been so amazing. And I just am so happy to share how it's, or have our clients share how it's affected their lives, because this is life-changing work. And you've all been so wonderful in helping us learn this and get the word out, and just thank you. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to thank Stephanie for sharing her story. I love that you were able to find a more compassionate voice for yourself. So you definitely had it for others, but it seems from what I gather that I-CBT gave you a window for that. And that sounds really wonderful. I want to thank you both, Christy and Stephanie. I would like to say, like, our clients are our best teachers, the finest teachers we could possibly have. And we all have learned from you. And we really appreciate your courage and vulnerability here with us. Perhaps other attendees have questions or comments that they would like to make. I would like to open the forum. Both Stephanie and Christy agree to be addressed directly. I also want to remind them that if you, for any reason, choose not to answer any of the questions that could be posted, we would absolutely support that. We're a group of therapists and will really support your agency. And if something doesn't feel comfortable, please do not feel obligated to respond. Just disclose as much as you feel comfortable. So if anybody would like to ask some questions or have some comments, this would be a great time to do so. We have a few minutes left, 10 minutes left.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Hi. Well, thank you again, both of you, to sharing everything. Really is so helpful to hear. Christy, I think it was you who mentioned that you really loved some of the tools that you saw in the book, and then that Brittany created. And you said, you know, keep making tools or whatever. I don't know if you can think of anything right now, but is there anything you kind of wish you had had earlier in treatment or even now? No pressure.
I don't know. I think, again, for me, like the rumination piece is really difficult, the mental rumination. So, yeah, I don't know if there's any other ways to expand upon the wonderful work that's already been done. You know, I have been attending like an IOCDF support group, but I find that it's very ERP driven. And so sometimes I kind of feel like the Lone Ranger in, you know, I-CBT. So I know Lori, her practice has a support group that's a group that's starting up. So I'm excited to take part in that. So I think maybe more support groups for I-CBT might be an idea. I don't know, maybe Stephanie has some thoughts too.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
One of the biggest or the hardest parts now is looking at the time that I lost and thinking, if I had made these changes years ago, what would my life look like now? And it's a struggle sometimes to not get into ruminating about that and put myself in the bubble just thinking about what things could have been, and am I a fraud because of this? Will life ever be the same as, you know, or, you know, same as others, you know, or am I always going to be 10 steps behind everyone? So I think that's the hardest part right now. You mentioned ruminating, and that's where my mind went. But yeah, support in realizing that you're good now, move forward with a good life instead of focusing on what you lost.
Fabulous.
I
Thank
think
you.
also the, you know, recovery isn't linear, because I did so well, you know, for a little while there. And then I did have some life stressors kind of cause some setbacks. So I know there's a section on preventing relapse in as one of the modules, but maybe just some more tips for that, that, you know, that there's different layers that, you know, how healing comes in layers, and it's a process and a journey. And
Helping to break habits would be a good thing to learn, because I mean, I'm 44 years old now, and it's like someone has unlocked the handcuffs and I'm free now. Now I just have to take them off. I'm carrying around something that's not locked, and it's a learning process to break habits, because I'm in the habit of sending text messages for reassurance. I'm in the habit of getting things in order, you know, keeping things in a certain way. And I realize that it's not about the action itself, but the thoughts behind the action. But there are some habits that I would like to break. I'm used to staying alone and not interacting. I'm used to doing those things.
I couldn't agree more about the habit. You know, it's like when you've been doing something for so long and that's your default, even though it's unhealthy, it's really hard to change that default and create those new neural pathways in our brains to go the right way. And, you know, I know like there is, between the thought and the action, there is the choice point, but sometimes it's just a blink of an eye, and just trying to have more agency, create more agency to trust myself and not cross the bridge. That still takes a lot of practice, like Stephanie's saying. When you've done something for so long, to try to retrain your brain takes a lot of effort, hard work, and time.
And Christy, you had, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Even though you no longer have the obsessions that you had before, if you keep going that same path, you're never going to let it grow up. And it seems like it would be too easy to jump back on that path since it's still worn. I want the old things that I used to do. I want that path to grow up. I want it to be unwelcoming to me.
I was going to say that Christy, you know, has talked a lot about, you know, we have talked about the void, and what do you do with that void of, okay, I used to spend all my time ruminating. Now what do I think about? I don't know if you dealt with that, Stephanie,
Yes,
or
ma'am, absolutely. Because she, like she said earlier, that hit home when she said I think it was your husband said he was thinking about nothing, and she never thinks about nothing. My mind is going 90 to nothing with all sorts of things jumping back and forth. Some of them are just thoughts that I don't need to jump on, because at least now I'm able to recognize when something is an OCD thought and just choose to walk away. That's something I didn't think I had control of before. I thought that the thoughts had control, but I realize now that I can choose not to give in to them. And sometimes that can be hard, but I do have a choice. And even more so than that, once I step into the bubble, I used to think I was there. I thought the door was sealed, but now I realize, you know what, at any given point, I can jump out of it just as quickly as I jumped into it. And that is something that I never understood before. I never thought it was possible to just get out of it, just step back into reality. And it's not always easy, but it is possible.
Yeah. That's beautiful, Stephanie. Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes there's still a little tiny piece of me that will believe the obsessional doubt. And I have to just keep reminding myself, this is 100% in the imagination. I know who I am. I can trust myself, and just reminding myself of the truth.
Yeah.
I make it a point to, at work with the new people that I have now, I make it a point to get involved in conversations that I wasn't invited into, and little things like that, because I have to tell myself, you're worthy. You're worthy of being here. You're okay. You're not, some, outcast citizen that doesn't deserve to be here. And it's actually received very well. I come across as more friendly, I think, according to people's responses, than before, when it was like every effort I took was to keep people around me and have them not leave me. But everything I was doing to make that happen just pushed them away.
Can I ask one question of the clinicians? Because Stephanie and I clearly have two very different types of OCD. And I know that there's a whole, wide variety. There's all different types of OCD, but I could see how ERP might be more successful. Maybe I'm wrong, but could help somebody like Stephanie, but then I-CBT kind of getting her even further along in her journey. But for someone like me with the mental OCD that I've struggled with, I don't really think ERP is helpful with that. I mean, I just don't. I think I-CBT is definitely the way to go. So I don't know if y'all have any thoughts on types of OCD versus which treatment. I don't know. It's just something that's always been interesting to me, the variety of OCD that's out there.
I think we don't know exactly yet, which people will respond better to ERP or better to I-CBT. We don't really have a lot of data on that, if any. I think the point is that what works for some people doesn't work for others. And so you need alternative evidence-based approaches. And some people, ERP works fine, even when it comes for things like unacceptable thoughts, For some people it doesn't, and I think that's the point. We need alternative treatments in order to give people options, and people need to become more aware of these options. And that's why it's great that you are talking about it, because hopefully we'll lead people to become more aware of options, and also for clinicians to become more aware of different options, because that's also still a work in progress, right? So I hope in the future we know better. It would be nice that we can actually predict in advance what treatment will work better for one person and the other. We already see that in the medical field, right? And sort of like, well, this treatment won't work for you, and that treatment will work for you. That's the kind of research we need as well in mental health and in OCD in particular.
Yes, science is always evolving, and hopefully we'll get more precise answers with further research with amazing researchers like Dr. Ardima. I really I realize that we're almost a minute away from ending the meeting. I don't know if there's any last observations anybody wants to make. Otherwise, we will be ending. And we want to thank again Lori and Margaret for bringing these two amazing humans to us. I'm so happy that I-CBT was an option for you, and that you are in a course and a journey towards recovery, and ongoing enjoyment of your life and freedom.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.